Amy 蔡美儿，哈佛大学文学学士、法学博士，现任耶鲁大学法学院终身教授。她以严格的教育方法将2个女儿都送进了哈佛大学，并于2011年把自己的教育方法和对东西方教育的认知编成《虎妈战歌》一书，震惊西方教育界。5月11日，虎妈 Amy 蔡来到蒙郡 Wooten High School， 为华人家长讲述自己的成长经历及分享在教育孩子上的经验。
I had my first child, Sophia was 1, so I went on the academic job market. I applied to 100 law schools around the country, and I'm not lying, I received 100 rejections. 100. 10 of them after interviews. I was so dejected. It's so humiliating. And I remember calling my dad and saying, Dad, it's not going to happen. You know, I know you've always wanted me to be a professor, but it's just not going well. You know, I got these 100 rejections. And I'll never forget my father's response. He said, wait a minute, let me understand. You got 100 rejections and you want to give up? My dad thought 100 was a low number. This is a man, if you remember, he's a man that crossed an ocean to come to our country. He didn't know a single person. For him, the idea of 100 rejections, nothing. You just keep trying. So I applied to a few more, got more rejections, and finally I got one offer, Buffalo Law School. I was so excited, I was going to move there, and then the last second, Duke Law School, which I think had previously rejected me, unrejected me and gave me an offer because somebody else had pulled out. And what I always tell my students is, it doesn't matter how many rejections you get, you just need one good offer. So that's when things started to come together for me. How much time do I have, Paul? How much? No, do I have about 15 minutes? 15? Okay, great. So, very quickly, one of the things when I was in Mexico that I noticed working is that all the rich people that we were working with were lighter skinned, taller, blue eyes, and all the people, the poor people doing the Xeroxing, the hard work, were shorter, dark, and more indigenous blooded. And that is the wealthy people were ethnically distinct. And I put that together with Southeast Asia, because my parents are from the Philippines. I had known that in countries like the Philippines or Indonesia, the Chinese are a very small minority, but they control a lot of the economy. So this was a pattern I noticed, and then my mentor at Duke pointed out South Africa. So I coined the term market-dominant minority in the first book that Jamie referred to, called World on Fire. A lot of people in the West, they focused correctly on oppressed minorities. Minorities that are both economically and politically oppressed. I focused on something different, which is this phenomenon of small minorities like the Chinese in Indonesia that represent only 3% of the population but control about 70% of the private economy. And it's a very unusual phenomenon, and I said that in these countries, democracy, which we love in this country, may not work the same way. It can be very destabilizing. And that became my tenure piece. It became the book Jamie talked about. And I bring that up because when my mom read this book, World on Fire, you know, it became a New York Times bestseller list. My mom read it and she said, Amy, this is what you're writing about? Everybody knows this. And I said, you know, and she was wrong though. I knew it, she knew it, because it's where we came from. So once again, I'm saying this perspective of being an outsider can also be a source of strength. It was something that I was aware of, I had insights into. So it took me 35 years, a lot of mistakes, a lot of dead ends, to figure out the secret, just to be myself. Stop writing what other people want you to write. I had a lot of articles that went nowhere just because I was so bored by them. So it's very hard to be creative if you're not interested in the topic. I'm going to skip, for lack of time, My next book in 2007 was a book called Day of Empire, and I will just say that I think this is the book that's most interesting for our times in America. I looked at all the great hyperpowers in history, these like the Roman Empire, the British Empire, basically the greatest powers in history that almost dominated the world. And I found a remarkable pattern, which is that every one of these hyperpowers, on their way up to power, were amazingly pluralistic, open, and tolerant. That is, they embraced outsiders, they embraced ethnic minorities. That's how they built their multicultural armies. They were able to harness the talents of the best and brightest. Conversely, I found that in every single case, the decline, the fall of these great powers coincided with intolerance and bigotry and xenophobia. So it's very interesting, that thesis, in light of what's happening today, and I really sometimes wish that I had written that book 10 years later. Anyway, so this brings me to Battle Hymn of the Tiger Mother. Completely different book. All my other books, I did so much research, 7 years, there are thousands of footnotes. I wrote this book in 3 months, no research. And I think, I'm not sure, some of you may know it, but I actually wrote it in a moment of crisis. When my younger daughter, Lulu, rebelled at the age of 13 against my strict parenting. So, backing up, when I was little, I complained about my parents all the time. Why do we have these crazy rules? But as an adult, looking back, I am incredibly grateful to my parents. I've had so many opportunities. I feel that I am good at coming back from failures. I think they gave me resilience. So I would say that my parents, having been so tough on me and having had such high expectations for me, is the greatest gift that anyone has given me. And that is why I was so determined, even though my husband's not Chinese, I wanted to raise my own 2 daughters the same way. And with Sophia, my oldest daughter, it was super easy. She was self-motivated. I actually didn't even have to ever force her to do anything. So I started getting cocky. Parenting is easy. And then my second daughter came along, Lulu, completely different, and boy, did I get my comeuppance. I feel Lulu was a kid, I think, born saying no. Even when I was pregnant with her, she just kicked so hard. Very rebellious. Even just before she went to college, she refused for a long time to take any standardized tests. She said, I want to be a garbage man. She reminded me of a wild horse. And one of the problems is that she and I had very similar temperaments. Fast, stubborn, hot-tempered. And we just locked horns from the beginning. We just fought and fought and fought. One scene from Battle Hymn that I love is we were practicing violin one time when she was about 7. And in the middle of practicing, Lulu stops and says, "Stop it, Mommy, just stop it." And I responded, "Lulu, I didn't say anything. I didn't say one word." And Lulu said, "Your brain is annoying me." I know what you're thinking. And she was right. I was thinking her elbow was too high. So the first 2/3 of the book is funny. They're about these fights and showdowns. But the last third of the book is not funny, because at age 13, my daughter, Lulu, suddenly, we used to fight, but then we'd jump into bed at night and laugh and make up. When she became a teenager, not so. She became extremely angry and alienated and cold. We just had terrible, terrible fights, and there's one famous scene in Red Square. But basically, I realized at a certain point, and this is the exact same time that my younger sister got leukemia and had to have a bone marrow transplant. So it was this horrible, dark time. I thought, have I done everything wrong? I noticed in the middle of this horrible fight, it occurred to me, I could really lose my daughter. I could lose her. And when I suddenly saw that, I didn't care about grades or violin or colleges. Who cares about any of it? I just wanted my daughter. and I changed very much completely. And it was at that moment that I started writing this book. And I showed my daughters every page, and it was like therapy, because she didn't really understand why I did these things. So the battle hymn was actually never intended to be a how-to guide. It's really the story of my own journey as a parent, trying to maintain the values that my parents instilled in me while adjusting to the very different personalities of my daughters. It's about a lot of things. One of the big themes in Battle Hymn that I think might relate to a lot of you is it's also about generational tension, generational differences, and the problem of privilege. When I was growing up, my dad wore the same pair of shoes for 8 years. And when he said, "You've got to get good grades or else we can't survive," I got it. I believed it. It was easy. By contrast, we're not rich at all, but my kids grew up in a big house, 2 cars, we vacation in nice places. I always had to wear ugly clothes when I was growing up, so they had expensive tennis gear and expensive shoes. And the result, there's a Chinese phrase, success can never last, prosperity never lasts 3 generations. And it is very difficult when your children, they know they can survive. If they don't feel it, if they don't work hard, they can't survive. And I remember Sophia once had a great line when I was arguing with her, saying she said, "Mommy, it's not my fault that I'm not a poor immigrant's daughter." So that is something that I can talk a little bit about. There are some generational forces that you just are very difficult to fight against. And I learned about that too. And finally, the biggest, and I think I'm going to close with this. Well, the book, I think at the broadest level, is about how to combine the best of East and West. In my opinion, when it comes to raising children and educating children, I think that Eastern parenting and Western parenting have exact opposite problems, different strengths and weaknesses. And I can talk more about that in Q&A, but maybe I will offer 5 quick tips or rules of thumb that, in my view, are good ways of trying to strike that balance between East and West, and then we'll open things up for questions. And some of these things are things I learned myself the hard way. So, number 1, pay attention to your child's personality. This is where the Western focus on individualism is a strength. Lulu and Sophia are so different, and you know what? They were different the moment they were born. When I think back now, they didn't change. Their personalities are their personalities. And I think that was a mistake I made. Lulu, if you have a kid who's just really social and likes having fun, maybe it just doesn't fit to force him to play the violin and do math. And you know what? Those skills are good for leadership. They're good for EQ. They're good for other things. So that's one. And I think that's important because in the long run, recognizing this is the only way to get more Asian Americans into prominent positions in politics, in media, in entertainment, in finance, in the arts. That brings me to tip 2. I think you should give your child more and more freedom and choice as they get older, but not when they're very young. So again, I think that the East and West have opposite problems. I tend to think that Western parents give their children too much choice, too much freedom, including the freedom to give up. I think sometimes it's not good to let kids give up too quickly because it's very difficult to build self-esteem. You can't just give it to them, you have to earn it. On the other hand, I think that traditional Chinese parents give their children too little choice. So I tend to think that it makes sense to start with a more Asian approach when they're very young and not mature enough to make their own decisions. I mean, if you tell a 6-year-old, go pursue your passion, it's going to be playing video games all day. No child wants to work hard. On the other hand, I think the Asian approach can be too narrow and too suffocating. one question is, why do so many Asians play only the piano or the violin? Occasionally the cello. It makes those instruments so competitive. Why not the French horn or the drums, which I make a joke about? And also with careers. A lot of the book, The Triple Package, may be relevant or interesting to you guys because there are a lot of great things about immigrants. Hard work, discipline, work ethic, But one weakness of immigrants, and this is not just Chinese immigrants, it can be immigrants from any country, is that immigrants often, because they're so concerned about survival, they often have a very narrow definition of what counts as success. You can only be a doctor or a lawyer, or something stable, an accountant. And less civic, as I mentioned. So instead of this viewing the younger generations as declining, what the triple package does is it offers a different perspective. In some ways, the younger generations, because they have the luxury of not being afraid that they're not going to survive, they are the ones that can afford to be more creative and more innovative, maybe more artistic, more politically active. Okay, I'm going to go quickly here. 3, teach your children the importance of honesty and morality. In the super cutthroat, competitive world we live in, everyone's so worried about colleges and grades. It's easy to forget this, but it is more important than anything else. Look at this college cheating scandal. There are more and more kids out there getting caught plagiarizing. They're so stressed they will do anything to do a good grade, and especially if their parents are pushing them. It's devastating for their future and for their moral character. So I think it's incredibly important, more important than getting good grades, that parents should constantly convey to their children that nothing is worth the price of your integrity. That should be lesson number 1. I guess I'm on point 4. Encourage your child to be unique, not to follow the herd. A lot of people miss this in reading Battle Hymn of the Tiger Mother because they think it's about, strict parenting. But if you read it correctly, it's actually a very rebellious book. Pro-rebel book. The star, in some ways, is Lulu, the big rebel. My father, I revealed, is a rebel. And it's really funny, when my mom read the book Battle Hymn, this is what she said. She read this and she said, Amy, no Chinese person would ever write this book. Because the tone is so crazy and bold, it's not like keeping your head down. Point number 5, and with this I will conclude. Encourage humor and laughter in your homes. Teach your children how to be happy by example. A lot of us say all we really want is for our children to be happy. But your children are watching you. They imitate you. So if you are miserable, if you are stressed all the time, if you never have any fun, if you never have a release, how are they going to know how to be happy? And I would say for all, my dad and my mom being strict and all this, the fact that my dad was such a huge personality, so daring, so much love of life, I think that is actually the most important thing that he taught me. So, I guess when it comes to, you can tell all your friends that the Tiger Mom's advice is to relax and have more fun. Okay, so with this, I thank you very much. You've been a wonderful audience. Open to
Thank you for the opportunity to ask you questions. You mentioned that, or you had talked about how your mother gave you advice in regards to, I'll call it, racism when you were young. What sort of things would you tell your daughters if they are in a similar situation?
Yeah, great question. Well, first, to be honest, my daughters are only half Asian, and it's a huge difference. They don't feel, I have always felt like an outsider. Even right now, at the law school where I teach, I definitely still feel like an outsider. But I actually have adopted my mom's philosophy to a great extent, and I did write about it in the triple package. It's very hard to deal with bullying. Actually, one of my colleagues has written about it. And I think it's a little different for boys and girls. It's quite an interesting topic. So So I'm not going to do a good job with this. I will just say that I did the same thing as my mom a lot. A lot of it is like, look, trying to instill from very early on a sense of pride that can really carry you through, and that has to start very early. So I know a lot of young kids out there, it's a tricky balancing act, right? Because a lot of people, it's just not resonating for them to learn about Chinese history and Chinese poetry, and you got to listen to them. Sometimes it's not empowering, and I think every child is different. But for some, and again, I talk to my friends from India, my friends from Nigeria, from Ethiopia, and this is a real phenomenon. It's kind of a shield, an insulator. Like, look, this is where we come from. You don't need to worry about their opinion.
Thank you for this wonderful book and all the tips. I have a question based on the virtual reality. Okay, what would change to your life or to your relationship with your daughters if your husband were an Asian man?
Well, I think it depends on what kind of Asian man. Because again, it's interesting for me to think about my father. My father was so not traditional in many ways. But this might be what you're getting at. I do think that my family benefited from the fact that we had two parents with very different philosophies. I think that in some ways it was the best of East and West. And when I give talks in China, my talk is actually very different. Because in China, you often have two tiger parents. And also, the school is a tiger school. Right? So it's like everything is strict, everything is suffocating, work, work, work. So when I give talks in China, my message is like, give them more play dates, give them more fun, because I think you need to kind of balance it. So I think that if I've actually seen Chinese friends of mine where you have both parents that are very strict, and sometimes I think it's too much. I think that those are sometimes families where the child just needs to get out. And, as we all know, there are unsuccessful stories of tiger parenting too.
What is your best tip if your husband always argues with you?
Best tip? Well, my best tip is I don't think you should, no one is perfect, but ideally you wouldn't do all the arguing in front of your kids. It's better to try to do it behind the scenes, arrive at some consensus before you present it. Because otherwise it's like a war zone, and then the children can exploit your weaknesses. Then you'll get nothing done.
Professor Chua, my pleasure to visit your speech today. And after an uncomfortable question, I would like to really talk about leadership, which is Asian Americans, so to speak, very well as a country. It is the issue of affirmative action. And being a lawyer yourself, and you know that there is a lot of community work that is important. And as for at least among the Chinese Americans, as you know that some people they'll go for one and then one will go the other. If that's great, and
So, I have been asked to go on TV and to write about this issue, the Harvard lawsuit, affirmative action, and I have always refused because it's an extremely complicated issue for me, and I have a lot of different thoughts. First of all, with respect to the Harvard lawsuit, I really don't like the way the debate is being framed. I think it's extremely important to separate out your views about affirmative action, and you could have either view, and your views about anti-Asian bias. And I think it's been dangerous because they've blended the two together, and it puts Asian Americans in a terrible situation, because if you defend the lawsuit, then, oh, you don't want to help minorities. And it's terrible. And then you feel pressure to be, in favor of affirmative action, then I see people condemning the people bringing the lawsuit, which I think is also very unfair, because I do think there is an anti-Asian bias. You can see it, and I don't know how the lawsuit will come out, but in this personality thing, the way that people, I think there's stereotypes about what counts as a good leader. I have experienced this myself, and I will tell you something very honest. When I was growing up, I would always, maybe with my parents, like, don't worry about discrimination, don't think about that, just work harder. Always just work harder. And just based on some stuff that happened to me, so established, just last fall, where I felt there was a lot of unfairness directed towards me, I really felt like an outsider. And I really felt that this wouldn't happen to a lot of other groups. It's just because of the group that I'm in, and I've had a lot of time to think about it. So I have very different views, for example, with schools like Stuyvesant and that issue. I think it's incredibly unfair that you have Asian parents, Asian families that are extremely poor. Extremely poor. Their parents are laundry people, they own restaurants, they've saved all their money for education, and somehow they're viewed as having an advantage. So I think that's extremely unfair. But I have slightly different views about the high school than I do about Harvard. In general, I am a supporter of affirmative action, but I don't think that that should be conflated with anti-Asian bias. And I think part of the problem is that the way this whole lawsuit has been framed, in a way I think Asian Americans are again losing out. They're getting targeted and they're pitted against themselves.
All right, thank you so much for coming. First of all, I just want to say that I think this idea of combining Eastern and Western perspective is kind of really mean. It's really wonderful. But I was just wondering, what do you think about how we as Asian Americans should navigate this rising tide of identitarianism? I'm a rising sophomore at Yale, so my perceptions are a little bit skewed by some of the events that have been going on over the past few months, and the language that's being used, this language of privilege, oppression, destruction, power. And so how should we as Asian Americans navigate this current political landscape? One thing that's been going on in this county is that racial protests have been imposed on some of the high school programs. How do we think of our place as part of this society and sort of jump into?
I'll be honest, I almost think I could learn more from you on this. It's been, as much as it's been difficult for you, believe it or not, it's been just as, or maybe even more difficult for me as a faculty member. Because I feel the same issues. First of all, I notice, it was raised today, Asian Americans are so diverse, right? They're both diverse in terms of income, but one thing, and of course they're made from so many different countries, but one thing that I really noticed is that politically, it really tracks what generation you're in, right? So I can almost tell from looking at a student what their politics will be. If it's going to be third generation, it's probably, the person's going to be extremely progressive and not really even identify with all this China stuff. But if you're somebody that, who just came over, could be on the other side of the political spectrum. How to navigate it? I've written about this in Political Tribes. I think it's a terrible moment that for the first time in our history, United States history, we are starting to exhibit some of the destructive socio-political dynamics that I used to think were limited to the developing countries. These ethno-nationalist movements where people are pitted completely against each other. So if you try to take the middle ground, you're instantly hated by both sides, right? It's not like you're mediating. And I have found it extremely difficult to do these things. You can Google me. I've gotten lots of trouble for doing very, very mild things. If you don't take this position, and sometimes it's like, based on who you are a woman of color, you must have this position. And, I'm sorry, I don't know if it's my dad or the rebel in me, I will not listen to what other people tell me. I will have my own views. And that's American, right? That should be great. So I think it's a really hard time. I'd love to have more conversations with you about it. On campus right now, even the whole question of free speech is very complicated and caricatured by both sides. So I know that's not a good answer, but it's a really important and really great question.
Thank you so much.
Hi, Amy. I just want to thank you so much for coming today. I think you are a great advocate for the AAPF community. And a parent that a lot of people look up to, so thank you. My question is, when you were talking about the approaches to parenting best of the East and the best of the West. You mentioned that one of the mistakes you made was not taking into consideration your children's personalities. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Right. Lulu, my younger daughter, and I've spoken to wonderful people in the audience. It seems like many people have a Lulu. And you know, I think I've got very, very stubborn. You know, I should have seen, like right now, she is out working, and all of those things that made me so frustrated when she was a student, because I just wanted her to get straight A's and go to a good college, and you know, and she would, she just was so difficult. You know, I mean, I remember telling her at one point, Lulu, I agree, I know you're going to be amazing. My job is to keep you out of jail. You know, I just wanted to go party and do all this stuff, and somehow she was always getting in trouble. You know, before she went to college, my one piece of advice for her was, Lulu, other people say, be yourself, I love you. My advice to Lulu was, remember, everyone else may do it, but you get caught. She always gets caught, you know. So I think that it was not, although she became a great violinist, and now it's weird, now she claims to love it, she loves classical music, those fights I had with her, I think they were a mistake. Screaming, yelling, you know, just so much. And one thing that I regret is, something I said is that, remember, your kids copy you. So you can be telling them one thing, but they're also learning by the way you're behaving. So sometimes I hear my kids yelling or talking loudly, and I'll say, don't talk like that. And they'll say, Mommy, you talk like that. You know, so I kind of wish to, you know, bring things down. I think another problem is, maybe this is sort of I don't know if it's an Asian American thing, but I got obsessed about little things. Every test was so important. This next paper, oh my God, if you don't get this, it's over. You know, and then college, you gotta get into one of these. And I have a very different view right now. Hopefully for younger kids, people with younger kids, this will help, because it's so competitive right now. It is a different time than when Jamie and I went to Harvard. It's so competitive. I don't think people should be obsessing about those Ivy League schools. You know, I have so many students who graduated from fancy Harvard or Yale, then went to Harvard or Yale Law School. They graduate, they are lost. They are miserable. They kept getting good grades, but they don't know what they want to do. And they're depressed. Sometimes they break with their families. It's not everything. By contrast, it's funny, University of Maryland, I have many, many students who took off time, and some of my best students at Yale Law School actually went to Maryland, or Connecticut actually, and they're the least entitled, most interesting students. So that, you know, maybe colleges can be different. And finally, I know so many people who didn't even go to college, a good college at all, who, you know, were the Lulus who dropped out and did something else. And you know what? Many of those people have startups, they have a YouTube channel making millions of dollars. They are in jobs that my students want. So I have a sort of a different perspective now. Like, I can see with Lulu, I tore my hair out. Oh my God. You know, and I realize now that the skills that she has, she's fun, people like her, high EQ, very funny. Carry her a long way. She's doing extremely well. I mean, it would drive me crazy. Lulu now, when she comes home from school, she's sleeping until 12 noon. Oh my God, you know, it kills me. But then I realize, no, she gets it all done. She's her own person, and it works for her. So that's kind of what I mean. It's just, I have my own temperament, my own timing. It's different from hers. And just realizing that, you know what? Different people are different.
Just a quick follow-up question. I do apologize. I don't want to take up too much time. Would you say that your two girls were really strong in the STEM fields?
No, my kids were terrible in the STEM fields. I wanted them to, because that's where all the jobs are. No, my kids majored in philosophy and history and arts, and they didn't go in the direction. I tried though. I tried, but.
How would you recommend that Asian American parents be able to parent children who, you know, may not be focused on the STEM fields as much? Because I feel like that's something within the community.
Yeah.
A lot of times parents.
Right. So I actually encourage people. So first of all, I don't like stigmatization in either way. sometimes I feel there's so much pressure just attacking math and attacking. You're going too far. If a kid likes science and math, great. Everybody wants to be good at those things. But I do think that if many children are not interested in those skills, including myself, and there are actually so many careers out there, that's what I would say. There are so many careers that maybe immigrants don't know about, that are very respectful and that make a lot of money and are very stable and interesting and can lead to community things. So I guess that it's really my time to just open your eyes about different forms of success.
Hi, thank you so much. You kind of took the words right out of my mouth, but I'm going to college next year, so I've been thinking a lot about careers and what I want to major in. And I was wondering what your children are doing now and how much would you say you have in that and their career plans.
Great. So believe it or not, my view of this tiger parenting thing is that it's best when children are very young. I am a fan of self-discipline. There are a lot of studies out there that show that children who can sit still, and do anything, it's a huge advantage in college, and so I'm a fan of that. But I think that the strict parenting, you should start to let it go. So when my kids went to college, believe it or not, they can confirm, I was almost totally hands-off. I let them major in whatever they wanted, and I think that I do think it's important to let kids make their own mistakes. The problem is you don't want them to make really huge mistakes that they can never recover from, right? But, I would say my oldest daughter, Sophia, trying to be a little different, majored in philosophy and Sanskrit. She was rebelling against, in her own way, she's been given. When she went to college, it was right when the Tiger Mom stuff broke. She went her first day at Harvard, all the students were together, and they put up this video, there was a funny play, making fun of our family, so she was right there. So I think she really wanted to be her own person, so she decided she would major in Sanskrit. And I think she enjoyed it, but I don't think she would do it again. But that's okay, And Lulu did history, but she's kind of going into, I don't know, So now in terms of graduate school, unless you're going into medical school or the sciences, if you know that, good for you. My nieces do that, that's wonderful. But for a lot of the professional schools, believe it or not, the majors don't really matter. At the law school, we take English majors, philosophy majors, history majors, math majors. We have a lot of math majors. We have music majors. So you'd be surprised. I think you have more flexibility. I would suggest taking a bunch of different classes, and you may not know what you love, but you will often know what you hate.
So I'll ask a practical and a lighter question. So when children were young, practice piano and violin for 5-6 hours a day, and you have to work. So if you don't mind, you share your typical day schedule. I'm asking you this because with the book I like it and the very inspirational. And just one question. I'm thinking of that about which was doing that every day. It's impossible for me to do. And also, I was able to write a sequel about what is the idol of the Tiger Mom.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I am writing a book right now. It is it's a personal book. I don't know if it's exactly a sequel. So to be clear, the working 5 to 6 hours a day with the children was not their whole childhood. It was near. Actually, it was right before Lulu rebelled. So we didn't do that when they were very young, but it was when I got really serious about these music competitions. I really went nuts with those. And I don't know what I think about those right now. So yes, I am very disciplined. I'm somebody that gets up at 5. I'm very organized. I prepare speeches and I block things out. And I was just joking with Lulu. Lulu and I are very close now. Both my kids and I are very close. That's the thing. I don't care about what they did. It's the fact that they are close to me, want to talk. That to me is the biggest success. But she was making fun of me because the schedules I would make would be, 2 hours violin, this, and then there would be 30 minutes, fun and relaxation. And she's like, Mom, that's just not how fun and relaxation work. It gets slotted in there. But So when they got older with Lulu, I hired somebody from the School of Music a student to come practice with them sometimes. When Lulu and I started fighting so much, I couldn't do it myself. So I would get a couple hours then. But it was a very, very difficult life. When Paul was mentioning it, I don't know if I would necessarily advise it for everybody, right? Because I really ran myself down. Like I would have a meeting, I would teach my students, and then I would have to say, oh, I'm going to a meeting now. And then I would race, speed, get all these speeding tickets, go pick up Lulu, take her to the violin tutor, come back, and I was just always running, and once I wore two not matching shoes, because I was just running all the time. So logistically, I don't even know if I would necessarily recommend 5 or 6 hours every day. Sophia did that kind of by herself towards the end, and again, when they were little, it was really more like a couple of hours.
Hi, Amy. Thank you very much for coming, and you demonstrated all the good personalities of Asian Americans. Passion. We should score high, right? My question is about the critical thinking that you mentioned. I noticed that for this younger generation, I think that many of the parents probably will share in common with me is that they have lots of opinions. They're not afraid of throwing out their opinions. And compared with all these kids, we were educated in China, and we were more critical about ourselves. We always try to think very hard, and then when we speak about it, and then we still have been go through many rounds of killing ideas. But for these younger generations, they are not afraid to speak out, and they are not afraid to share their opinions. My question is, how do you activate their thought process to think critically about their own viewpoints?
Oh, interesting. Great question. So the first thing I'll say is I'm really in favor of, even though it's very difficult as a parent, I'm generally so proud and happy that the younger generation has these views, right? It was a struggle that I had to overcome, but I think it's good, especially if we want our children, some of our young kids to go into politics or leadership positions, or business, or to be leaders, of anything. I agree with you that in some ways, a weakness of Western society is that you just reward everything, like even if it's a not very smart boy, or not very interesting boy, and everyone's like, good for you, And so I think striking that balance is difficult. For me, it was more when I mentioned that my husband's Jewish. It's like, make the debate, like I like this idea of, instead of just being lectured by them, it's more like, what do you think about, and that's something that when I was little we would never talk about. What do you think about European nationalism? And they're like, what is that? Can you explain it? And then so that when they're having an opinion, it's about something substantive that you could contribute to, as opposed to just, Mom, that dress is ugly. That's an opinion, but it's not that valuable. And I also think that respect is that fine line, and that's something I think we all, I have really tried to stay with the more traditional way when it comes to respect. I feel that if you don't respect yourself, sometimes I see some of my friends just being walked all over by their children. They swear at their parents, and it's not good. That's not the same thing. And one thing I've said is being spoiled or being arrogant is not the same thing as confidence. People get that confused. Being just talking all the time and saying arrogant things and putting down people, that is not confidence, right? So I think it's a very tricky thing that parents have to focus on. Yes, it's good that you can have a right to disagree with me as long as you can argue it in a respectful way. But just this kind of random disrespect or something, I don't think is especially valuable. And I don't think it's especially American, actually, because this is a generational thing that Western parents are dealing with also.